You're listening to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast, episode 184. Welcome to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. I'm your host, Paula Price, lawyer turned certified executive coach. This podcast was created to empower women lawyers just like you to create a life and practice you love. Join me every week for a break from the hustle so we can focus on you, what you truly want, and how you can create it. If you're over the overwhelm, done with putting out fires, and ready to redefine success on your own terms, you're in the right place. Ready for today's episode? Let's dive in. Have you ever had the feeling, whether it's at work or in your personal life, like there has got to be something more? It could be that you have been working really hard. You have been hitting all the milestones that you set for yourself, right? You have the job that you want. You have the promotion you've been seeking. You work on the files you've always wanted. You've got the clients you've always dreamed of. You may have the personal life you always dreamed of, the white picket fence, the 2.5 children, the partner, all of the things, the vacations every winter. And yet you find yourself feeling like there's got to be something more, like something is missing, like somewhere deep down, you're lacking the sense of fulfillment that you thought you would have when you got to be in the position that you are today. If this is something that resonates with you, you are 100% in the right place, and I'm so glad that you joined me for today's episode. Welcome. Today, we're going to be diving into how to find greater fulfillment, particularly in 2025. If you're listening when this episode goes live, we are nearing the end of the year, and so this episode will set you up for the new year and how to find greater fulfillment as we turn a new corner into 2025. And if you happen to be listening to this episode sometime in the future, welcome. It's really neat to think of you listening today. And what you'll learn today will be equally applicable to you to help you hit the reset button wherever you happen to be in your practice. Now, if you are listening when this episode goes live or sometime shortly thereafter, what I would love to share with you is that there are a few opportunities that we have to work together in the coming months and in the new year. In the month of December, on December 6th and December 19th in particular, I will be offering a couple of free trainings that may be of interest to you, especially if what you're looking for is creating greater fulfillment. The first of those trainings will be on Friday, December 6th at noon Pacific time. It will be a 60-minute webinar, and it's all about women leading in law. This is an opportunity for you to explore the role of leadership in your practice. This is applicable to you regardless of the stage that you are at. If you're a junior lawyer just starting out, then this is an opportunity for you to think about where you're going in your practice, the role that you want leadership to play as you develop your skills, as you advance in your career. If you're sort of at that midpoint, or if you're about to transition into leadership, you're about to make partner, you're a senior associate, or you're a newly minted partner, or maybe partnership is what's waiting for you on the other side of the calendar year, this is a great opportunity, again, for you to reflect on your practice, to think about the type of leader that you want to be, to think about where you might make some refinements in your practice. And then finally, maybe you're already in a position of leadership, and this is an opportunity for you to reflect on some of the habits and strategies that you've been applying and to question whether or not these are the same strategies that will take you to the next level of leadership in your practice. So I would encourage you to join me for that webinar. Again, that will be December 6th. It's a Friday at noon Pacific time, and I'll be sharing the link to register. It'll be by Zoom in the show notes that go along with the episode. So if you cannot find it, don't worry, just send me an email and I'll be sure to send you the registration information. Again, that would be a free webinar on December 6th at noon. Now, I will also be hosting another webinar in the month of December 2024, and that webinar is going to be one designed to help you set up for the new year. You will not be surprised as a coach, or if you listen to my podcast before or for any amount of time, that I love goal setting. I love reflecting on what we've accomplished over a calendar year or any stretch of time, really. And so on December 19th, which is a a Thursday, we are going to meet at noon Pacific time. Again, that's Thursday, December 19th. And during that training, what we are going to do is we are going to focus on setting you up for success in the new year, in 2025. So this will be an opportunity to reflect on everything that you've accomplished over the course of 2024. I think too often we jump into a new year without doing that reflection work, and we miss out on opportunities to celebrate the transformations we've already made, right? The big milestones we've achieved, cultivating that sense of accomplishment and fulfillment, frankly. So we're going to start with that, and then we're going to move into goal setting for the year to come. So this is a great opportunity for you to set that time aside in your calendar to be guided by a coach, that would be me, to ask you questions that will help you gain clarity over the direction that you want to go in the new year. And I can support you in those exercises and help you walk away with a clear vision of what it is you want in the new year. So when other people are just making their resolutions in January, you will already have yours established, and you'll go into the new year feeling calm, feeling collected, and confident about what is to come. Now, I mentioned there were a few opportunities. So those are two opportunities, the trainings that are going to be on December 6th and December 19th. Again, you'll find the links for both of those trainings to register on the webpage that hosts this podcast episode recording. Again, if you can't find it, send me an email and I'll send you the information. And the other opportunity I wanted to share with you is that in the new year, starting in January 2025, I will be hosting another 6-month program. I've been doing this for the past 2 years, and it has been wonderful. A program for a group of up to 8 women lawyers who are interested in developing their skills, who are interested in focusing on a particular goal over the course of the time that we work together. And we're going to be doing this as a group coaching and mastermind program for women who are leaders in their organization or who are becoming leaders in their organization. And the reason that I say that is because I find that what we are focusing on is really that growth curve, right? Where you are on that leadership growth curve where you've already established your practice, and what you're really looking for is setting goals that are beyond what you've set before and which require you to step into a leadership position to build your confidence as a leader. So if you have any questions about what I mean by that, you're welcome to reach out to me and we can have a call to talk about what the program is like and whether or not you are a good fit for the program, whether the program is a good fit for you. To give you an idea of what we do together, we focus on 6 different themes over the course of our work together. There's a different theme each month, and the themes are, number 1, setting a goal. So you would set a goal for what you want to accomplish in the 6 months that we work together. We then transition into self-concept, so defining who you need to be to reach that goal. Then we move into obstacles, which are the obstacles that will come in your way, right? The minute that you set your goal, you'll start to see the challenges that you're likely to face. And those challenges are going to be different for every individual. So we work through what those obstacles mean for you and how you can overcome them. We talk about confidence, authority, and power. This is an area where I see so many women lawyers looking for ways to increase their feeling of confidence, to speak and conduct themselves with more authority in their practice and in their personal life, frankly, and to assume power, right? You may find that you've been giving your power away unconsciously. And so this is an opportunity to notice where that is happening and to bring that power back. We then talk about boundaries, right? So once you start deciding where you really want to focus your energy, what goal and goals are most important to you, we're going to have to start setting some limits on what you allow into your spaces, which means setting up some boundaries to keep some things out. And then finally, some sustainable success, right? We want to focus on how you can continue to grow, how you can continue to lead in a way that is sustainable. So I've just shared a lot of information with you about how we can work together. Thank you so much for bearing with me. So I hope to see you at these webinars in December and would love to see you in the program that will be starting up in January. So if that's of interest to you, again, you can reach out to me. I can give you all the information you need. The link to register for the course will also be available on the website, linked to the notes that accompany this podcast episode. So with that, let's dive in and talk about creating greater fulfillment in 2025. Now, this is a problem that presents for a lot of the lawyers that I work with. It has presented to me before as well, right? This idea of hitting a plateau, feeling unfulfilled, it can happen at any time in your practice. You might notice it right now because we're entering into those winter months and the days are shorter and it's a little bit cooler. You might find that naturally your energy slumps a little bit. Maybe that's part of what's causing a feeling of less fulfillment. It also could be that this is more of a long-term feeling of, being a little bit in the blah zone, right? You might be hitting a career plateau where you feel like you've worked really hard to get to where you are. Everything looks really good on the outside, but you're not quite where you want to be, right? It doesn't feel the way that you imagined that it would. And what this might look like for you is you might feel fatigued and tired by the work that's on your plate. You might find that work feels really repetitive. You might find that you're feeling worn down. And it could be that maybe what you need is a break, right? Sometimes going away, taking a vacation can rejuvenate you and give you a fresh perspective. And sometimes it's not something that can be fixed by taking a holiday, right? There's something going on here that needs a little bit more attention. And so that's why we're here today. We're really thinking about, okay, what is going on and how do you create that greater sense of fulfillment? So why this happens? Well, sometimes what happens is you hit your goals, right? You have these milestones that you've set up for yourself, whether it's making partner or getting on certain files or working more with particular clients or getting a new position, for example. And you go about doing all this work. You work really hard. You create this life and this practice that looks really, really good on paper, but then you feel like something is missing. Something feels off. You might think of it as reaching a plateau, right? Where you've struggled to get to where you are and now it's kind of easier. And yet it feels kind of flat to you. You might get a little bit bored, but then instead of exploring that further, you tell yourself, well, you really should feel grateful. You're in this amazing position. People would be lining up to have the role that you have, and you might even feel a little bit of guilt or even shame about feeling like this isn't the be-all end-all when you've worked so hard to get there. You might find it harder to find meaning in your work, right? You might kind of wonder why it is that you're doing what you do every day. And what you can also find is you fall into this negative spiral, right? It's almost like you start noticing more around you that feels negative and you see more of that. You might start to feel disconnected from your colleagues, from your clients, from your friends, from your family. And if you start to feel disconnected, what you might notice is that you start to withdraw and then you feel increasingly disconnected. And there's a number of ways that you might be trying to cope with this, right? Or to deal with this. And one is, what I mentioned before, right? This idea of shrugging it off, dismissing it, telling yourself it's not a big deal, you'll get over it. And what effectively you're doing there is dismissing your own concerns. You tell yourself you're strong, you can handle it, you're going to bounce back. And that may work, but what you might find is that it continues to weigh on you, right? This feeling of being a little bit stuck, having this plateau, not feeling engaged in the work that you're doing, having that sense of not feeling super fulfilled. You might also try to distract yourself, right? This might mean looking for answers outside of yourself, right? I don't know about you, but sometimes that will lead me over to LinkedIn or some other virtual platform where I start looking at, my law school classmates. What are they doing? And you might find yourself in that same pattern where you're looking at others and you're looking at what they're doing, and then you're comparing where you are to where they are. And this is never really all that helpful, particularly because what is going to be fulfilling for one person isn't necessarily fulfilling for somebody else. So you might find yourself there. It's very distracting. You might decide that it's time to get a new training or a new certification. You might decide it's time to get a new job. Things are a little bit dull. It's time to move on. You might also find that you start saying yes to things, right? Offers that come into you to work on certain projects or files or committees or whatever it happens to be. And you're so, I don't want to use the word desperate, but you feel so restless almost that you're willing to take on anything just to have a change of scene, right? Without really thinking about whether it's something that you want to do. It's a distraction. So that seems better than what you're doing currently. Another thing that can happen is self-sabotage, right? If you're used to being in that pursuer state, right? That chase energy, that hustle energy, where you're really busy striving toward a goal. And if you've reached all the goals that you've set for yourself and you're feeling in that plateau state, what you might do is engage subconsciously or consciously in some form of self-sabotage so that you can kick yourself down a notch or two, which then puts you back in that feeling of struggle, right? Which may be uncomfortable, but it's familiar and it is distracting. And there's a quote that came to mind to me as I was thinking of this concept, which is this idea that when you're hungry, you have one problem, right? You're looking for food. When you are no longer hungry, when that hunger has been satisfied, all of a sudden you have hundreds of problems. So this might be the same for you, right? As long as you're hungry for that one goal, for that one thing, for those milestones, that's really all that your attention is focused on. That feels like you are productive, you have focus. But once you've reached that milestone, it's like all of a sudden there are hundreds of different ways, directions you could go in, and that can feel really overwhelming. And then finally, another thing that you might do, and this is something we're going to talk a little bit more about today, is you might set new goals, right? So if you reach a plateau and you find that you're getting a little bit bored, things are feeling a bit repetitive, another solution might be to set new goals. This can work. I'm going to share a little bit more in this episode about how you can set those goals so that you're not setting yourself up for less fulfillment, but that might be something that you do as well. And the reason that this may not be working, right, as a long-term strategy to gain that sense of fulfillment is that as a high achiever, and I am going to assume that when you're listening to this episode that you are a high achiever, right? The lawyers that I have worked with, the lawyers who seem to find me are all lawyers who are looking to achieve, right? You're looking to produce, you're looking to support people, you're looking to help people, you're looking to make an impact, you're looking to be the best lawyer that you're capable of being. I mean, this is you, right? You are a high achiever. And when you're a high achiever, you set out to achieve your goals and you will hit those goals, right? And so the question then becomes, what is the next challenge for you? So you may be hardwired to achieve and always be looking for that next thing. And what can happen is if you're in that repetitive cycle, right, of setting a goal, achieving the goal, setting the goal, achieving the goal, that can create some thrills at the beginning, right? If you're thinking about it, it's almost like a roller coaster ride, right? You get that win, that feeling of excitement when you hit the goal, but then it's like the goal kind of loses its luster, it loses its novelty, and you find yourself back to where you started. You need another goal. And so you keep on having this cycle of creating a goal, hitting the goal, and it can be exhausting, right? If you're doing that over time without ever feeling that sense of fulfillment. And you may have heard this referred to as the hedonic treadmill. It's this idea that you are on basically this treadmill where you keep setting up a new goal, you keep achieving more, you keep hitting those new milestones. And yet, while they're very exciting and fulfilling and satisfying at first, over time, they lose that appeal. And so it's almost like there's no end to the cycle. So what I would offer to you is that as long as you're in this cycle and you're feeling unfulfilled, right? And what you are trying to do here is to avoid some sort of feeling of discomfort, right? The feeling being that you're not fulfilled, that there's something missing, like it's not enough, or maybe it's that feeling of, I don't feel like I'm enough unless I've achieved these things. Then you'll continue to run on this treadmill. The feeling will still be there. And then you end up in this paradox of chasing, right? So if you think about any time that you are chasing something that you can't really fully grasp, right? I mean, I think of chasing a bus, right? And you can catch a bus, right? You can chase it, step onto the bus, there you are, off you go. But there are other things that you chase that are more elusive, right? Chasing that feeling of fulfillment, chasing that feeling of success, chasing that something that can be very fleeting. As long as you see yourself as the chaser, as long as you are really comfortable with being the chaser, you will in fact stay there. That's where the paradox comes in, right? It's like the more you chase, the more you see yourself as a chaser, the more you're likely to stay there instead of ever realizing the thing that you're chasing. So what this all creates is this feeling of being in an endless loop, right? You feel like you're on that hedonic treadmill. You may feel unsatisfied. You may feel unfulfilled. And you may tell yourself that you're in pursuit of fulfillment, but you don't really have a clear idea about what that means to you. You feel increasingly discouraged because even though you're trying these different things, you're setting up different milestones, you can't quite figure out what to do to make that feeling, that restless, unsettled feeling, go away. So what we're talking about today then are some strategies to help you gain that sense of fulfillment that you're looking for. And I've got a number of strategies here. I think about 5 of them altogether. So I'm going to take you through those one at a time. Now, the first strategy that I would offer to you is simply to accept where you are right now. And this may sound counterintuitive, right? If you're hardwired to want to achieve and to accomplish more, and that you're seeing fulfillment as being on the other side of some achievement that is in front of you, then you're going to resist this idea, right? The idea that you would accept something feels almost like you're resigning yourself to it, that you're giving up, that you're no longer in pursuit. And that might feel like inherently against your own grain. But what I would offer to you is that when you can accept where you are right now, you remove a layer of resistance. It's almost like you stop burning up unnecessary energy that you can then devote to something else. So it may seem a little bit abstract. I'll give you some examples of where this shows up. You might have the example, here's an example, where maybe somebody in your life is a complainer, right? I think we all have people who we know who like to come to us and complain. And in fairness, sometimes we are that person. And so what you might notice is that complainer will come and find you and they'll complain, right? They might find you in your office. They might phone you. They might be someone that you see on a regular basis. And what you might do after being in the company of this complainer is turn around and complain to somebody else about this person that's always complaining, right? So you can see how complaining from person A transfers over to you, and you then become the complainer, right? We're layering complaint upon complaint. Now, sometimes you don't even need another person to create these layers, right? So if you think about something that creates stress for you, right? Maybe you've got a trial coming up or a closing or a deadline, or you're working with somebody who you kind of don't always trust, and are they going to get it to you on time? Or you've got a client that you work with where it's quite a difficult interaction. You know, they're going to ask you a lot of questions and they're going to speak with you a certain way, and it's going to cause this stress. So you have the stress of the thing that's actually happening. But then on top of that, you layer stress about the stress, right? Not only are you stressed, but then you're thinking, oh, I'm so stressed about this stress. So again, you've got this layer upon layer. Or maybe it's resent, right? Maybe you feel resentful over something, right? It might be that you feel resentful because you keep baking cookies for your kids' bake sale, and you kind of ask yourself, why am I always the one who's baking cookies for the bake sale? It drives you crazy. And what you might find is that you resent baking the cookies, but then you resent the feeling of resentment. And so all that I'm trying to offer you here under this first strategy is to notice that if you can accept, right? If you can accept where you are right now, if you can accept that you may feel unfulfilled, that will create a level of acceptance, right? It will remove a layer of that feeling of unfulfillment, right? If you're feeling unfulfilled because you feel unfulfilled, you're now removing that extra layer, and it makes your problem a little bit easier to solve. You might find that your shoulders feel a little bit lighter, and you're able to approach whatever it is with a little bit more energy and a little bit more optimism. So that's step 1. Now, the second strategy that I would offer to you is to stop seeing yourself as unfulfilled and to start looking for the ways that you are fulfilled. Right? Now, this is very much a mindset shift, right? What we are doing here is we are choosing whatever it is that you want to see. And at any given time, in any situation, as you know, being a lawyer, there are the facts of a situation, and then there's the interpretation of the situation. So if you're looking for the most negative interpretation, you will find that. And conversely, if you look for the most positive interpretation, you will also find that. So what I'm going to invite you to think about is how you can see yourself as being more fulfilled. Now, what I would love to offer here is a model. It's one that I've spoken about on the podcast before. It is the Be, Do, Have model. There's a whole podcast episode about this. It's episode 55. It's called Do Less, Be More. So you can go back to that if this concept is intriguing to you. And to summarize, what we're doing is we're shifting from the model that we often have unconsciously to a more intentional model where we start with who you're being instead of what you're doing. So let me rewind a little bit. The default model for most of us is the do, then have, then be model. So the idea here is that if you do all of the things, right? Let's say you've got a goal. You do all of the things, right? You work hard, you sacrifice sleep, you sacrifice self-care, you spend less time with your friends. You stress yourself out to no end. You test yourself. So you're doing all of the things to have the result, right? The result could be a new job. It could be making partner. It could be making practice group leader. It could be starting your own firm. It could be making more money. It could be having more prestige. It could be winning an award. So you do all of the hard things to have the result. Then you will be, right? Then you see yourself as being fulfilled, satisfied, happy, whatever that happens to be, right? So you need to do all the things to have the result that you're seeking in order to be fulfilled. But there's a problem with that. Number one is how you get there is how you will be there, right? So if you see yourself as being super stressed out the whole time that you're in pursuit of your goal, chances are you're not going to reach your goal and all of a sudden be relieved of all that stress. My guess is that you're going to carry that stress with you. You'll just find a new way to embody that stress, right? To find new things that will be stressful for you. The other thing is that who you are as you get there is who you will be when you get there. So similar idea, right? Who you are in the process may not be changing. So if you approach your goal, right, without really thinking about who you are in the process, without embodying that sense of fulfillment, then instead of feeling fulfilled when you finally have the thing that you worked so hard for, right, the title, the prestige, the money, then you'll go back to what you're used to, right? You'll be hustling, you'll be chasing, and you'll be trying to capture that elusive feeling of satisfaction and fulfillment. So the trick here is to reinvent your self-concept, right? And to start with the be, right? Before you reach your goal, I would encourage you to find a way to embody that sense of fulfillment right now, right? Who you are going to be, right? Who do you need to be as that person who is fulfilled, the be? What will you do, right? So we're not stopping taking action. In fact, we are taking action. We're just taking that action from a place of being fulfilled. What would I do? What would you do in that position if you already felt fulfilled? And that in turn creates the have, the result that you are seeking, right? So you start with the be. That be informs the actions that you take, the do, and then you will have the result that you are looking for. So this doesn't mean that you stop going after your goals. It just means that you go after those goals fueled by a sense of sufficiency and calm and purpose instead of a feeling of chasing, of lack, of urgency and need. So just to summarize where we're at, strategy 1 is to accept where you are right now. The step 2 is to embody that be, do, have energy, right? So start to see yourself as somebody who is fulfilled and to look for ways that you are already fulfilled. Now, the third stage here is to find the pieces that have meaning to you and zero in on those. So what I find is often we look at other people, right? I mentioned scrolling on whatever, Facebook or LinkedIn or some other digital platform where you see all these people, right? And you see what is fulfilling to them. And then you go out and achieve similar goals or you have similar goals. And then for whatever reason, you just don't find that it fulfills you. So the question here isn't so much to look at what society says is fulfilling or what other people tell you is fulfilling or what you think you've learned is fulfilling. Here, I'd invite you to get really clear about what is actually fulfilling for you. And the best way that I know to figure out what that is to feel for it, right? As you're going about the work that you're doing, think about what is really rewarding for you and what feels less rewarding for you. So what you might do then is to just notice, pay attention as you go about your workday. What feels hot to you, right? What energizes you? What do you enjoy? What feels cool to you? Right? What are some of the activities that feel really draining for you? What are some conversations that feel like you really dread them? You don't want to have them? What feels really exhausting in your workday versus where do you feel like you're fueled for desire? So the best way that I know to identify the pieces that have meaning is to pay attention and to notice what brings you that sense of fulfillment. And then you can start to build your practice around that sense of fulfillment, right? You can find ways to cultivate more of that. Step 4 is similar, but it's more of a self-analysis. And this is to find your zone of genius and increasingly work in that zone. So the zone of genius is a concept that was coined by Gay Hendricks. And he talked about it in the context of a book that he wrote, The Big Leap. But he distinguishes your zone of genius, that being kind of your top zone of performance, from your zone of excellence, your zone of competence, and your zone of incompetence. So incompetence is something that you're not very good at. Competence, you're okay, but not amazing. Excellence is where you do really well at something, but you may not truly love it, right? It may not be something that resonates with you. And a lot of lawyers will get trapped in this zone of excellence because you're really good at your job. You do it really well. People give you positive feedback because they like the results, but you yourself may not love operating in the zone of excellence. The zone of genius is that one step up, right? That is where you feel alive. You enter into that state of flow, right? Time just passes by because you love it so much, right? It could be writing and research and interacting with your clients and solving problems and thinking about big, complex problems that nobody else can solve but you. It might be speaking. It might be when you're in trial. It might be when you're in the middle of a closing and everything is flying around you and you know exactly what needs to be done. Your zone of genius is going to be unique to you. And so the more you can identify when you fall into your zone of genius, right, relative to your zone of excellence, for example, or what will probably be more clear is your zone of competence or incompetence, right? You want to focus in on where your zone of genius is and try to enhance the amount of work that you do in that zone. So that is step 4, is to find your zone of genius and find more ways to cultivate work in that area. And then finally, step 5 is to make changes, right? I've talked about a number of steps that are really internal, right? Mindset, that is an internal shift. Accepting where you are right now, that again is internal. Doing that searching, what feels good to you, what work carries meaning, what feels energizing, what feels intriguing, where are you drawn, where are you talented, right? That zone of genius, that is you noticing what really resonates with you. And then finally, make changes, right? Once you've done that internal work, make external changes, and then you'll start to notice, right? So that might be that you're changing jobs. It might be the pursuit of an external goal. It might be the achievement of a title. It might be working on a certain type of file. It might be switching practice areas. You need to be the one who makes those changes, and then you can do that assessment, right? Is this actually more fulfilling for you? And you might think of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, right? Like, here's a fairy tale where this Goldilocks goes out and tries a number of different things, right? The first chair is too small or too big or whatever it happens to be. Second one, the opposite. And then finally, she settles on the chair that's just right. And so you want to do the same thing for yourself. You want to go and test different theories and then figure out which ones resonate the most for you. What really is the best and most fulfilling place for you to be? And this might surprise you, right? You may have always seen yourself as a corporate lawyer and you're finding yourself not feeling all that fulfilled in that role. And maybe you move into a role in the nonprofit sector and all of a sudden you find that you're perfectly aligned. Or maybe it's vice versa, right? You always saw yourself in the nonprofit sector. And so you've been pursuing goals in that area. And then you realize that in fact, what you want is to be in private practice, right? It could go in any direction. You might think, I don't want to be on partnership track. That's not for me. The requirements are too much. I don't want a leadership position. I want something that's different. I want to be in the alternative non-partnership track. So you do that, but then you realize, actually, I want a seat at the table. I actually think that I would make a really great partner, and here's why. Or vice versa. There is no right or wrong. Absolutely. It really depends on you. It depends on your goals. It depends on your strengths, on what you see as most fulfilling for your future. So this is what I'm inviting you to do, is once you've done that internal accounting, to then go out and experiment in the real world and to find the things that are most fulfilling for you. Now, the reason this is going to work is that achievement alone, right? If we just kind of going back to what we talked about closer to the beginning of this podcast episode, if you find that you're on a plateau, and so you go and set a new goal and you just go and achieve that goal without doing the inner work, then what you might find is that you're on that treadmill, right? You're on that hedonic treadmill and you continue to achieve, but you're not able to find fulfillment. So just going out and doing and achieving may not be the solution. But conversely, if you're just trying to shift your mindset and think differently and focus differently, and that isn't working for you, then you're not going to find fulfillment either. And so what I'm proposing here is to do both, right? To do that internal work, to focus on your mindset, to focus on being the person who already is fulfilled, and then take your actions from that place, fueled by that sense of purpose and fulfillment already, right? to channel that, when you do those things together, that's when you're going to create the magic. That's where you're going to find that greater sense of fulfillment. The other thing that you're going to do through this process is you're going to get to know yourself better, right? As long as we continue to look outside of ourselves for that sense of fulfillment, for that thing that we should want, we're never going to find it, right? We really need to do that internal work so that we recognize it, so that we know ourselves better. Now, the skills that you're going to need, you'll need to be open to new ideas, right? The fact that you're here listening suggests to me that you are open to new ideas, that you are interested in trying new things. You'll need to be willing to try something new and to keep trying something new, right? I think sometimes we think, well, I just need to go and achieve X, Y, Z, and then I can kind of step back and everything will take care of itself. It'll be on autopilot. And what I would offer to you is that that's not, in fact, what is going to happen, right? That there will always be this continued learning curve, especially as lawyers in your profession. There is no limit to your capacity to learn, to grow, to contribute, to the impact that you can make. And so you are always going to be on that learning curve. It really is, for better and for worse. It is for better because there will always be more opportunities. You can always grow. There's always more impact. There's the intrigue and the excitement and the curiosity of learning and growing. And what I have found is that with that also comes sometimes that feeling of uncertainty, right? Because you don't know all the steps, they haven't been laid out for you. There comes a feeling of self-doubt, right? Anytime that you're reaching for something that is new and big and scary, it can trigger those feelings of self-doubt. It can raise that whole feeling of imposter syndrome. So that is part of that whole growth curve. But as long as you're willing to experiment and try something new, there is that opportunity for growth. This requires a willingness to be unskilled, right? Like if you think about getting into your zone of genius and how it's really wonderful to be there because you feel so alive, you feel so aligned, I would also offer that you'll need to put yourself into positions where you don't yet have the skills, right? You are going to be building your competence and your confidence in new areas. And so there's that willingness to be a beginner, even if you've been in practice for dozens of years. And it's also a willingness to question, right? Who you are, right? Who you are today relative to who you were 10 years ago is likely very different. And who you will become in 10 years is likely very different from who you are today. And so what this requires is putting yourself in that position where you're reevaluating how you see yourself, your self-concept, who you are, the role that you want to have as a professional and outside of your professional life as well, right? I don't see lawyers as operating in this vacuum where you have no personal life. You do, right? You have a combination of both. And so who do you want to be both in your professional capacity and outside of your professional capacity? And when you do these things, then what you create is you get a lot closer to that elusive feeling of fulfillment, right? So if right now you just find it's not something that you feel connected to, when you do this work, when you start to really cultivate your interests, when you gain that sense of awareness, when you accept where you are starting from, that's when you really start to feel that sense of fulfillment. You feel the joy in your work. You really notice the impact you're making. You feel your improvement year after year, where you're making progress, where you're making an impact. That is what I have for you this week. Thank you again for joining me here today. It has been such a pleasure to have you with me to talk about finding greater fulfillment in 2025. Now, if you would like to join me for the upcoming trainings in December, I would absolutely love to have you there. As I mentioned, on December 6th, that is a Friday at noon Pacific time, we will be diving into leadership for women lawyers. So if that's something that is of interest to you, please do register. You'll find the information on the page that has the show notes for this episode. And if you cannot find the information, just send me a note, please. I would be delighted to hear from you. And on December 19th, which is a Thursday, we will be talking about 2025. I will be guiding you through an evaluation of 2024, the successes that you've had, areas where you may want to have further growth in the new year. So again, that will be at noon Pacific time on Thursday, December 19th. And you'll find the information also on the page that hosts the show notes for this episode. Now, for any of you who are interested in working with me in a longer term capacity over the course of 6 months within a group of other amazing high achieving women lawyers who are looking to get together, to support each other, and to focus on a goal for your practice from January to June in 2025. You will have an opportunity to do that as well. I'll talk about it a little bit more during the trainings. I'll talk about it more on the podcast. And if you have any questions about that, by all means, please do let me know. I'd love to hear from you. So with that, I am going to sign off for the week. Thank you again for being here, and I look forward to reconnecting with you again soon. Bye for now. If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, subscribe and follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you haven't already, please leave a rating and review. Your feedback will help me create a podcast that's tailored to your needs and goes straight to the heart of what matters to you. For instructions on how to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com/podcast launch. See you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. If you want more information, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com. See you next week.